Of all the mainstream news organisations peddling their own particular narrative or strand of tribal politics, the BBC is by no means the worst offender. Consequently, keen-eyed or politically savvy consumers often react to instances of BBC bias in ways that an onlooker might deem disproportionate. But surely operating as an arm of the British state necessitates a higher standard of accountability. Publicly funded media groups bear not only the usual responsibilities of any journalist worth the title, curiosity, openness, and above all, honesty, but also the duty to put the well-being of the public in question at the heart of everything they do. Being shareholders, essentially, in such institutions, taxpayers are likely to feel more than disappointed as and when duties are neglected. They're going to feel cheated and betrayed. And when that happens,
look the fuck out.
I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself. Somebody sent me that clip and it was just too ridiculous not to do it. Oh dear. Anyway, I'm willing to bet that of any distrust one might feel of the BBC, a good 20% is going to be a direct result of the panel programme Question Time. You could devote an entire YouTube channel to rebutting this show once a week. That would be kind of boring, I guess, but you would never run out of material. There is so much nonsense spoken on that show that you'd probably become more politically informed if you just sat at home watching episodes of Scooby-Doo, to be quite honest. Very recently, for example, the week's guests were asked about immigration, and specifically how Britain should respond to the migrant camps in Calais. And I want to draw your attention to one remark in particular made by the American screenwriter Dustin Lance Black. It was quite special.
Dustin Lance Black.
As we're talking about this money to be spent on this border, just as someone who isn't from here, and I know this great country has some issues. Who doesn't? You got some things to figure out. Who doesn't? But this country is a shining example of what is good in so many ways. Yeah. And I want to applaud both parties. I'm not from either party. On the work you've done along the way for inclusion, for acceptance of difference, to make sure that some of the things I'm hearing my president back home say would not be acceptable here. But understand that some of these people who are in Calais trying to get here, they're not coming to try and steal from you or to ruin your culture. They're coming here because you're a giant, beautiful beacon of hope for them. Okay. And I hope that the government finds it in their heart to spend some of that money to make sure that their conditions are livable there and to let some of them in to share their goodness with your greatness.
There's a strong clap anything faction here tonight.
It's fun.
Apparently even I can appeal to it.
Indeed. So we haven't moved on, apparently. We are still, as a country, in the same place we were dialectically on this issue last year, the year before, and the year before that. Feelings are still trumping facts, and people can continue to spout sentimental platitudes and be socially rewarded for it.
They're not coming to try and steal from you or to ruin your culture. They're coming here because you're a giant, beautiful beacon of hope for them. Okay. And I hope that the government finds it in their heart to spend some of that money to make sure that their conditions are livable there and to let some of them in to share their goodness with your greatness.
First of all, can we just acknowledge the elephant in the room for a second? That is Team America.
Hey, hold on a second. Are you from Hollywood?
I'm sorry, but there's no point pretending, is there? And I am constantly amazed when I see Americans by how synthetic and sparkly most of you are.
Just kidding.
Right, now that the ad hominem's out of the way, I love the transition from you folks have this magnificent country and culture that has taken centuries to build, and you're a shining beacon of hope and prosperity in the world, so let's wreck it. Like some kid who finds himself alone in a hotel suite and starts jumping on the bed and spilling ice cream into the television. This is our home, Mr. Black. And yours too now, apparently, as you've recently moved here, so welcome. All I ask is that you honour the compliments you just bestowed and start taking our future a little more seriously. I mean, let's begin by stating that these people in Calais are illegal migrants who are attempting to break into Britain. How do I know that? Well, A, because they routinely gather around truck depots in the hope of smuggling aboard, often disabling vehicles and threatening drivers in the process. And B, because no asylum seeker, desperately fleeing persecution and slaughter, would leave the danger zone and then wander through a multitude of safe countries because Turkish cuisine isn't quite to their taste. Or perhaps they're big football fans, so they have their hearts set on Manchester. I mean, it can't work that way. This is madness. Secondly, I wonder what goodness you feel is lacking so in the British character that it needs an injection of Muslim migrants to top it up. But let's have a glance, while we're on the subject, at a couple of individuals who came directly from the Calais jungle and, rather than goodness, brought this with them instead.
It was December 2016 when most of us were making our Christmas lists, but one man living here was making preparations that were much more sinister. Inside a bedsit at number 28, a man was collecting the ingredients for a bomb. Police believe Derby's Christmas shoppers could have been a target.
We were clearly on the sharp end of a very serious plot that presented a very real risk to very many people.
We moved in at the time that we did in order to prevent what we perceived to be an imminent attack.
And that's not all. Place poison in food like fruit and vegetables in markets, or inject poison in drinks and foods that are prohibited in Islam. Munir Mohammed arrived in the UK on the back of a lorry. The Sudanese national applied for asylum and was dispersed to Derby while his case was considered. He later signed up to an online dating agency for single Muslims. His profile said he was working to prepare for the next life. Through the site, he approached Roeda El Hassan from London, who also had links to Sudan. Her profile said, "I want someone who'll be upfront, honest." The police believe Mohammed was interested in her because she could help him make a bomb.
So he was a fantastic addition to British life, wasn't he? Planning to blow up the citizens of Derby and inject ricin into our food. Like the fucking Joker. Have you seen the original Batman with Michael Keaton? I'm sure you all have. And the Jack Nicholson character, he wants to kill as many people in Gotham as he can, right? And works out the best way to do that is to put poison into various household items like toothpaste and shampoo. We're facing cartoon evil.
Mohammed and El Hassan had denied being behind any terrorist plot to use explosives or poison. But last week, after a trial at the Old Bailey in London, they were both convicted. They're due to be sentenced next month.
The potential consequences of the plot that Munir was involved in could have been horrendous. I'm extremely thankful that we were able to get ahead of it and we were able to stop him before he could act.
And I hope that the government finds it in their heart to spend some of that money to make sure that their conditions are livable there and to let some of them in to share their goodness with your greatness.
What goodness did Munir Mohammed bring to Britain, Dustin? Did any politician on the panel ask him that? Did any audience member? That's our problem. Exhibit B, Ahmed Hassan. Let's see what goodness he brought. Originally from Iraq, so maybe some figs? A sheep hide?
Sugar dates and figs, sugar dates and pistachios.
No?
An 18-year-old has appeared in court charged with attempted murder following last week's bomb attack on a London commuter train.
Off the road and off the pavement, please.
Ahmed Hassan of Sunbury-on-Thames, a town to the southwest of London, is accused of carrying out the attack at Parsons Green Station last Friday. 30 people were injured in the explosion on a packed commuter train. The homemade bomb detonated but apparently failed to fully explode. As well as attempted murder, Hassan is also charged with causing an explosion likely to endanger life, using the highly volatile TATP, known as the Mother of Satan.
The train was packed with families, commuters, school children. As people panicked to escape, the platform was left full of people who couldn't.
There was like people on top of people. There was a pregnant lady underneath me shouting, "I'm pregnant." There was a little boy in his red and black uniform from around here. He must have been 8 years old, little tiny thing, his face smashed into the steps.
They described it as a wall of flame.
A wall of flame coming down a carriage after a bang. And there were people at the back of the tube as well who said that they'd heard a bang quite clearly from further up the train. The doors had opened and everyone had started running out, and a lot of people had been trying to climb over each other getting out of the tube.
It does sound like there was a complete panic.
Yeah,
trying to get on.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
And describe, you were getting on that tube. You clearly take it a lot. What is it like on a Friday morning at 8:30?
Sardines. I mean, there are hundreds of people on there. It's not. If an explosion goes off, it's going to be. It is appalling. It would be appalling. I mean, I wasn't on there, but it's just panic, chaos.
Let some of them in to share their goodness with your greatness.
Now, the odd naughty joke aside, I have no desire to insult this person. He seems perfectly decent. But we're living through this. And the two individuals I just introduced you to were known to us, okay? They snuck in illegally, we caught them, and then let them stay. So, the famous vetting procedures people promote as some sort of solution had presumably already been tried. And I understand those were just two examples, before you all jump down my throat. They're not representative of everybody in Calais. Yes, I know that. But they need to be part of the equation, don't they? Because we're supposed to be having a grown-up discussion. And it would be one thing if Dustin Lance Black came forward and said, look, I believe in the free movement of people, I don't believe in borders, and I'm prepared to put up with the odd Munir Mohammed, the occasional Ahmed Hassan, because the majority will have a chance at a better life. I could actually address that position and argue against it. I can't have an opinion on what he just said. It's sentimental guff completely detached from reality and the facts. And we're still there as a nation. We haven't evolved a speck if the audience reaction is anything to go by. For goodness sake, wake up.
But so if once you get the one of, well, okay, maybe they don't make us richer, maybe the aging population thing doesn't work, you get to another one, which is diversity. It doesn't matter if we're financially poorer. It doesn't matter because we're so much more culturally rich. Now, I should say that there is something in this. What society, Europeans certainly wouldn't do, is what society doesn't want to know as much of interest and culture as the world has to offer. Who doesn't want to know as much about the world and about the ideas of the world as possible? But, of course, the first person from, for instance, India to bring Indian cuisine into the UK does an interesting service, vimms up the local cuisine. It's not the case that the next 100 Indians who come in, for instance, bring 100 times more interesting cuisine. It's not the case that the first Sudanese poet who enters the UK massively brings interest to your country, and that the next 1,000 people from Sudan continue to just bring ever richer versions of the poetry of Sudan. And by the way, please don't ask me to name my favourite Sudanese poet. But this is just a part of that life. They also say, you also notice, by the way, that this is always a one-way street. Not once in my adult life have I heard anybody say that the thing that Eritrea needs most is an injection of Welshmen. that they just could do with some Welsh cooking. Or singing. Nobody says this. Nobody says, as Mark Stein and I were saying in the conversation recently, nobody says, the thing that the Somalis really need is a bit more Bach. I actually think it'd be nice for them if they had a bit more Bach, but nobody thinks that's an appropriate way to say it. But Europeans are told there's something hollow at our heart, as if we in Europe the culture of Dante and Goethe and Bach has some kind of diminishment, something hollow at its centre that needs filling by the world. And then you get to another stage in this, which is, okay, maybe it doesn't make you richer. Maybe the aging population thing does fall apart. Maybe the diversity thing isn't all it's cracked up to be. Or, as I put it at one point in my book, maybe we have to just do an agreement that this is a quid pro quo. We have a bit more gang rape and beheading than we used to have, but then there's a wider range of cuisines, so who's to... Life's all swings and roundabouts, so... But then you get to the last stage of that, which is the one that politicians now say and speak to us about, which is, okay, maybe none of these things are the case. Well, suck it up. This is globalization. This is going to happen anyway. This is a hell of a way to speak to the general public about their and their children's future. And it is only said, once again, to the peoples of Europe in this tone. So,
look the fuck out.